Well, the situation developed in Honolulu that because of an oil leakage problem, our plane was not able to fly on schedule. Things were getting a little tense over the length of time that we had out here because the cutoff date had to be the 19th due to Fish and Wildlife's regulation as far as our operation was concerned. So therefore it became an issue of were we going to be able to be out long enough to put on a quality DXpedition. We were also looking at a large amount of additional money than what we had contracted for the plane that was to bring us out.
Midway's over 1,100 miles away from Oahu, and there are not many airplanes that can carry a group of 20 people that distance economically. There are planes that will carry people that distance that one can charter for six-figure sums, but that would be transportation alone. So the Gulfstream G1 is an airplane that has been out here in the Pacific for the last decade, taking people to all sorts of places, to Palmyra, Christmas Island, Midway, Johnston, because it has the range, the payload of about 20 people, and it's affordable.
We, of course, continue to run expenses in Honolulu, but again, that wasn't so much the issue. The issue was getting out, getting things done. If we didn't do the expedition, how much money would have to be returned? The various foundations and individuals had put in money.
We're so entirely dependent on the Gulfstream G1, and despite very serious efforts to find alternate transportation, we had to wait for the Gulfstream G1 to be fixed, and we eventually came out on it a few days late. It's important to realize that amateur radio is a very helpful activity because it provides necessary transportation to these remote refuges. Midway's a little unusual because it has a very large airstrip, but some of these refuges are not visited for years by U.S. Fish and Wildlife personnel, even though they have exclusive jurisdiction over it. And when they do go, they go with amateur radio operators.
Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. This vast stretch, the largest protected area in the United States, larger than all the national parks put together. It's jointly managed by NOAA, by the state of Hawaii, and by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. What makes Midway unique is that Midway is the only part of the monument that's open to the public. They call it the window to the monument. Papahanaumokuakea refers to the incredible sacredness and cultural importance, particularly to the Native Hawaiians, of this location. And I'll butcher the exact, translation of various parts of the word, but what it refers to is that life begins up here in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. The big island of Hawaii with active volcanoes is still growing. It's a brand new island. It's the youngest in the chain. Up here, Midway is the second to oldest, millions of years old. And so these are the elder islands. This is where life began. This is where spirits return.
A couple of years ago, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did a study to determine what were compatible activities here on the refuge, and they determined that one of those activities was amateur radio. And so we are the first group that's been permitted to come out here and operate in view of this new visitor service plan in which amateur radio is an approved activity.
Midway Island is very unique from a radio standpoint. Just the ability to get here has been difficult. There were many challenges that had to be mounted. Over about the last 9-month period, we had to work on just transportation, the permitting, what it takes to actually get here.
The logistics for this trip provided their own unique circumstances. There aren't very many choices on how to get equipment here unless, of course, you have an unlimited budget. The only plane that regularly comes out here, the G1, only has a capacity of roughly 3,600 pounds, including bodies or freight. So we had to ship our equipment on a barge that was one of the regular Fish and Wildlife shipments. We shipped up 2 tons of equipment on that barge and then a small follow-up shipment on one of their planes prior to our trip.
We're going to start grouping these more in the front, the higher band ones, and then maybe the big IR, which of course is this one. Yeah. We could, I know, either or. But then we also have the 30-meter one, so we could stick one with radials in the volleyball court, if that makes sense.
We brought a very large complement of verticals. We have SVDA verticals from 10 meters through 20. We brought a DX Engineering vertical for 30. We also brought 2 Stepper Big IR verticals. We have a Battle Creek Special, thanks to that fine group. And we also have 2 Titan X V160E verticals.
And then separate these out. Doesn't have to have antennas in there. We can, if you want to bunch them out in front here because of the coax lengths, we can do that too. Because really the longest run I had was estimating 600 feet to the furthest antenna. We don't want to exceed that or we're definitely going to run out of coax. Okay? So you can imagine minus what, you know, how many feet for the radio field, where that one would be, and how much coax it would have taken.
We're going to put up the antennas that give us the most effectiveness at nighttime, because that's where we're going to get all our cues early on. So we're getting ready to put up 17 here, 20's already up, and then after that we're going to do 40 at both locations, CW and sideband.
A big pileup basically make me happy. Sometimes, you know, the pileup becomes so unmanageable, but you have to do your best to take the pileup quiet and synchronized. This is the real word, to take the pileup synchronized with you. You must be much sensitive as you can. Try to feel what's going on in the band, what people are feeling, and try to act the way to take the pileup synchronized with you. This place is something magic. You know, being here and thinking about the Midway battle, what's happened here in the Pacific, is much important for people like me coming from Europe. That's quite far from here. So it's like a dream to be here and watching the beach, watching the World War monuments all around the island, take you I can say, take you far with memory of what people are doing here for the freedom.
Midway is a fantastic place. It has a really neat history to it. Although there's been no sort of archaeological evidence, people think that the Hawaiians must have sailed to Midway at some point. You know, they probably sailed here and did some exploration, but then didn't set up a permanent settlement.
Midway does have sort of a unique political status in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, whereas most of Papahanaumokuakea, the islands of Nihoa, Mokubanamana, all the way up to Kuri, were part of the Kingdom of Hawaii and became part of the state of Hawaii. Since the 1860s, Midway has been separate. Midway was claimed by the United States of America under the Guano Act.
Guano is a buildup of bird feces over thousands of years. It forms a layer, and back in the day it was mined for fertilizer and was actually quite valuable. And so there was a law that was called the Guano Mining Act of 1856, and it said if somebody finds an island with deposits of guano, they can claim the island for the United States, and then they have rights to those deposits.
It was actually the first offshore island ever claimed by the United States. So it's sort of a unique role. It's never been part of the state of Hawaii. It isn't till this day. It's an unincorporated possession of the United States. And so it's very similar to some of our other Pacific remote islands that are also managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Howland and Baker, Jarvis, Kingman Reef. These are spots that don't have indigenous population and were actually claimed under the Guano Act as well.
Then about 1903, the Pacific Commercial Cable Company came out to Midway, and they were really the first permanent settlement out here. And they set up 5 buildings, which still stand today. And they completed a telegraph cable that would connect North America to Asia, and Midway was the final link. At the same time, Teddy Roosevelt, the President of the United States at the time, found out about how unique Midway was and the other northwestern Hawaiian Islands. And so he set them up as a protected area, and he would send out Marines here to evict all the poachers that were causing the damage.
That was the first real conservation effort. So it started over 100 years ago. In 1909, he puts the rest of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands under a national wildlife refuge, the Hawaiian Islands National Wildlife Refuge. So we just had a century of that wildlife refuge being up here.
In about 1935, Pan American Airlines began flying float planes that would start in San Francisco. They would go on to Honolulu, then fly on to Midway, then on to Wake Island, Guam, the Philippines, and then on to Hong Kong. So Midway was one of the stops. And that happened from 1935 until 1941. Then for many, many years, Midway was under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Navy. And it was a full-blown U.S. Naval Air facility. And during the Battle of Midway, it was very, very important, of course. The Battle of Midway was probably the most important battle in the Pacific and one of the most important battles in World War II. And it was the first time that the Japanese had ever experienced defeat.
The mid-80s, the military realized they didn't need this place for its strategic location and realized its true importance was for the wildlife. So in 1988, the Fish and Wildlife Service started working on Midway. In 1996, Midway was turned over entirely to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and became Midway Atoll National Wildlife Refuge.
Mexico 205.
Japan Fox 130, Yankee Mike.
Yankee Mike 59.
Japan Fox 130, Yankee Mike.
Okay, Japan Fox 1, Charlie Yankee Mike 59.
Also 59, thank you.
Roger, Kilowatt 4 Mike 205.
America 6, London Whiskey.
Romeo America 6 again. Romeo Alpha 6.
Radio Medical 1. 6, Lima Whiskey.
Radio Alpha
The DXer out there who is able to be there when we want to work him gets just as much as enjoyment of working us as we do traveling here and doing this and working them and providing that new entity. So many areas out there that are traveled to that are very, very unique. Some people will never, ever see them. Would those of us that are here do it again? Absolutely.
Alpha Charlie only.
Juliet America 8, Mike America Charlie 59 Q.
Juliet Alpha 8, Mexico, Alpha Charlie 59.
59, thank you.
Roger, thank you. Kilowatt 4 Mike 205. Radio America 1, Oscar Whiskey 59. Roger, thanks. Kilo 4 Mexico.
Japan America 6, Japan November Foxtrot.
Japan America 6, Japan Norway Foxtrot 59.
Thank you very much.
Roger, thank you. Kilowatt 4 Mike.
So here we are, the second week of October 2009, and stretched before me on the beach here we have this huge antenna array.
Before the trip, I had sent diagrams to Matt with examples of various types of antennas that we might deploy. He chose vertical as being the most compatible, and he preferred that Yagi antennas not be used.
We knew in working with the group that came out here that closer to December 21st is the ideal time to be broadcasting from Midway. But we also knew that by the 1st of November there's going to be albatross filling the sky.
And probably every 3 or 4 feet you can walk and see a nesting albatross, so it's truly amazing. An interesting part of their biology is that they're here on land for about 9 months of the year, and then 3 months of the year they're out to sea foraging.
And right now we have lots of little birds flying around that are pretty good at avoiding antennas, and the group that's out here is doing a great job of identifying their antennas to show them to the wildlife so the wildlife isn't impacted by the antennas. But albatross are a 15-pound bird with a 7-foot wingspan, and they don't dodge around things very well. So we looked at the window that we felt we could get as late in the season as possible without having the albatross return. And so I think we've timed it just about perfectly with 1 bird back already. Next week there'll be a dozen, and then 2 days later there'll be 100,000, and they return just that quickly.
We are in their environment, and we had to be aware of that in every moment. And I think that's what's unique about this particular operation, and I don't think it's really been done in the past in anything involving birds and their environment.
We're confined to a small area, and we have taken care to make sure that nothing we do has some collateral effect on the wildlife here. We put up a number of ostensibly intrusive antennas, but we have marked them liberally with surveyor's tape, which is both visible and makes a sound. In the time we've been here, we haven't had a single incident of a bird being injured. And so I think we've shown that we can operate here in an area that is densely populated by swarming birds and not have any negative impact at all.
Being a rookie, just about everything that I learned from everybody here on the expedition was good feedback and input from myself. It is a new experience for me, and I'm very excited to come on and work pile-ups. I've never really used a computer model, and the logging program that we use obviously is designed to send and give out call signs at rapid rates. Some of the pileups, interestingly enough, the type of propagation that we've been experiencing out here, you would call a station and they don't hear you, or they're getting a partial call, or they're not really sure. And it's always good to have a backup plan, and my backup plan, of course, is going back to the basics, which is paddle, which is what I use. I'll hit the button and it'll put the call out, but when I don't hear the station coming back, I go to a manual key, which I've set at a lower speed, and then when they answer, with my right hand, I'll hit the enter button logging them, and with the left hand, I'll go back to the paddles and give them the thank you or to you and go on to the next one.
Someone say pull.
The Battle Creek Special went up very easily and was working fine on 80 meters.
Arnie, take in your second from the top a little bit. Tom, let loose as he needs it.
I'm tying off my top.
Keep pulling. Come on, just keep pulling.
Yeah.
Keep going. Stop. Stop. All right. Okay, for the moment, tie that one off. Okay?
When we decided to try the other bands, we found suddenly in mid-tuning of an amplifier that the SWR went high. We took the antenna down the next day, and much to our chagrin, we learned that, you know, there probably is a good reason to follow the directions carefully.
What do you mean you can't copy it? So somebody want to call the shacks and ask them to QRT for 2 minutes?
A couple of the top hat wires had actually touched each other and had shorted out, and once we cleared that up and spread them out properly as directed, it worked perfectly again, and we used it to great advantage.
I like 160, so that's the reason I've been concentrating on 160 here. We got good operators, we got good antennas, we got good equipment. There's several antennas here for 160. We didn't have an opportunity to put up any beverages, any horizontal antennas. Everything's vertical, but they're working great. And the pileups have been unbelievable. I think we're up to about 34 countries now on 160.
We have certain activities that are compatible with our refuge mission, and so these are typically outdoor recreation. And so something like bird watching is a perfect fit. You come to refuge and you bird watch. We've set aside a certain amount of staff time to work with visitor groups such as yourself. And the ham radio operators are a little bit different than the bird watchers. And in some ways it takes less staff time because, you know, you're sort of doing your own thing, you're broadcasting, versus the bird watchers. We do a lot more organized tours around the refuge. It's a fine balance, I think, with bringing a low number of people to Midway. We can share with the American people what we have here. They can understand what we have, want to protect it, and have it here for the future generations, but yet having a few people here, then we don't impact the resource. So I think it's a balance, and the way that we're set up with our staff, we can accommodate, you know, a certain number of visitors each year.
We're in a very special place that most people cannot imagine, where the animals really are in charge and humans have to yield to their activities. And the Fish and Wildlife Service is rightfully obsessed with protecting them.
I think this DXpedition is memorable from what we're experiencing with the tremendous amount of effort that's being put into saving these birds.
The Laysan duck, also called the Laysan teal, is one of the most endangered birds in the entire world. Historically, they were endemic to the Hawaiian Islands, and because of people and basically rats and rabbits, they were reduced only to Laysan Island. Midway Atoll was picked as a second site to have Laysan ducks, and so we brought a total of 42 birds as the founding population to Midway, and now we're up to over 500, so it's been a nice little success story out here. One of the biggest threats to the refuge here at Midway are the accidental or purposeful introduction of non-native species. When the Pacific Commercial Cable Company was at Midway in 1903, there was one of the people that was really attached to canaries, and so he brought 2 canaries out in a little cage to Midway, and he went from 2 to 12 individuals in about a year, and then this person decided to just release the canaries in the wilderness. They were able to do well, and then after a few years there were hundreds around Midway. You know, we definitely don't want to interfere with natural processes, but when humans change a system, I think it's fair that we can help to change it back. So for example, at Midway, because of naval activities, 6 feet of fill from the atoll was taken and put on top of Eastern Island. So any little wetlands that were there once upon a time were filled in. And so by us restoring some of the wetlands, we're actually bringing it back to what it was before humans really changed Midway. And you can look at, Laysan ducks as part of the biodiversity of the entire planet. And you could think of each species in the world as a rivet on an airplane. If you lose a rivet or 2 on the airplane, the plane will still fly. But if you lose too many rivets, all of a sudden the plane starts to shake and then eventually it will crash. So that's one of the reasons why we're trying to recover Laysan ducks here in Hawaii and at Midway.
QRZ, Kilo 4 Mexico, Midway Island, listening 225 to 230. Echo, Quebec, Quebec, your call.
United Romeo 5, Echo, Quebec, Quebec.
Roger, UR5, Echo, Quebec, Quebec, 5 and 9.
5-9, good luck.
Thank you.
DXpedition to me is many things. I really do enjoy planning and executing it, and I'm usually busy doing technical support and fixing this and finding that. To me, that's half the battle.
This is the spoon fix for the squirrel cage cooling fan on the Alpha.
But I also do like to operate. I am a contester by background, primarily out of a multi-multi KH7X, and it really is fun to test your mettle and see whether you can do as well as you can in contesting. I think I came fairly close, but there's always room for improvement.
Thank you very much. 225, Kilo 4 Mexico.
Japan, Florida 2, United Papa, Mexico.
Roger, JF2 UPM 59.
Japan, Florida 2, Uniform Papa, Mexico. You are 59, QSL.
QSL to 59. Thank you very much. QRZ, Kilo 4 Mexico, and North Midway Island, listening 225 to 230.
Sometimes if you are a visitor at Midway and you look around at a few different places, you might be kind of surprised at, the things that are still at this wonderful atoll and island.
You see these massive piles of leftover everything, from street lights to power poles to old boats to old cranes that were here that were required to maintain a population of 5,000 people.
We have an old building, it's the old airport hangar building, and it has lead paint in it and asbestos. And so before you can even start to take anything off the island, you have to remediate those 2 hazmat items first. And of course that takes special training, a lot of funding of course, and then you have to store that material and take it off.
James, 9B1YC, and myself were fortunate to be able to go with a couple of the local support personnel, one of them who is an amateur radio operator from Thailand and takes care of the communications equipment on the island here. A lot of the infrastructure, accounting records, old computer gear, telephone systems, air-ground communications, all of that has by and large been abandoned. There is no power to the building, and many items are just strewn about. And we had to tour the place with flashlights and watch our step. We went up into the building looking for the old amateur radio station they used to have. We did manage to find various maps and pictures and things left over from those days. We collected all of these in the hopes that perhaps we could return these items in a more formal way in the future, or at least preserve the knowledge and pass it on to future amateurs. Well, before you throw all these away down the road, some of it probably still works, yeah? We found bits and pieces of old antennas and rotators and things, and a lot of mementos. It was very interesting to see some of the history of this place, both from the Navy days as well as during the early days of the Fish and Wildlife Service. They've been learning for 10 years now. They've been running it, and now seems to be a good time to integrate amateur radio back into this location.
This year we were successful in taking off 400,000 pounds of scrap metal off the island, and we were fortunate enough to have a barge come through on another project, and so we took off all sorts of old vehicles and scrap metal and old air conditioning units and so forth. So there's an example of something that we've done even this year, and with plans to do a lot more with the appropriate funding and planning.
Today, with an island population of about 70 people, it's a challenge for us. Some of these buildings, some of the infrastructure, it's a never-ending challenge. There simply aren't enough resources to go around, and we're a small speck in the middle of nowhere. If we were in Boston Harbor, I imagine Midway would look a lot differently than it does out here, 1,000 miles from the nearest congressional district.
Midway Atoll has a human population of about 60 people or so, and of those 60 people, there's approximately 6 permanent U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff, and then we have some volunteers that work for us. But then most of the people that actually work at Midway are part of a company called Chugach Industries Incorporated, and they're contracted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to maintain all the infrastructure out here. In addition to our wildlife mission and our historical mission, we also have another mandate to maintain an emergency airfield for every commercial twin-engine jet that flies over the Pacific. And so if any of those planes have trouble, this is a safe place for them to land. So we receive extra funding from Congress through the FAA to take care of this airfield. And so we've contracted Chugach to take care of the airfield and all the infrastructure associated with it. Because of that, we have about 45 workers with Chugach, and believe it or not, most of them are from Thailand. Midway is pretty unique. It is a possession of the United States, but it's not a state or territory, and so Midway doesn't have the same sort of labor laws that you would have in a state, and that's one of the reasons why we can have Thai workers working here on the refuge.
We've worked very hard in the last 5 or 6 years to what we call right-size Midway. Instead of generating enough power for thousands of people, hence burning thousands of gallons of fuel a day, we've invested in new distribution systems, new generators that just generate enough power for the 70 people who are here, saving us thousands of dollars a year in fuel cost and on our carbon footprint in the world.
Germany, Zanzibar, okay? Japan, America 3, Echo, Germany, Zanzibar, 59. Okay, QSL, you are 5 by 9, QSL? QSL, thank you, sir. QRZ, K4M, 300 to 310.
Here you are, in the middle of nowhere, you plan on being in a bare bones environment. We arrive and lo and behold, there's cable TV. We have access to the internet to look at the spots so we can adjust our operations accordingly. Who's in here now? We got Bruce. He'll be back on at 7 a.m. Let's put Max on 20 meters. We have a dining hall with fabulous food 3 times a day. That relieves us of those worries.
This is not the Machias.
And this place is beautiful. I mean, you're surrounded by birds and turtles and seals, and you really do have most of the comforts at home. So there's this dichotomy going on here between out in the middle of a rare DXpedition, and you want to turn on the TV? Go back to the barracks and turn on your favorite show.
This is like operating from a nice hotel spot, in that the accommodations are great, the food is great, the climate is great, people are great, so this one's going to be right up there at the tops with me.
73, thank you, sir. K4M 300, 310.
We have the sideband tent, and it is a tent out on the beach. And we put the CW ops in the bar. Air conditioned. They have a refrigerator. They have a coffee pot.
The snacks are yummy.
They have all the tables you could wish for. They have power, and they look out the window at a gorgeous lagoon that is green and luscious and birds flying by. And you look out further and you see the reef with the breaking waves, all from the comfort of an air-conditioned bar. At night, people that work on the island come in and watch Monday Night Football, all the while on 3 tables in the back. CW is cranking away at 200 an hour rates.
And 4 DWK 59.
Roger, you're also 59, thank you.
Thank you. Kilowatt 4 Mexico 7183. November 6, November 6. Italy Zulu 6, Charlie Lima Zulu 59. Roger, 73, Kilowatt 4 Mexico. Europe only, please. Europe only.
Sugar Kilo 3 Whiskey. Sugar Kilo 3 Whiskey.
Sugar Kilo 3 Whiskey 59.
Thank you, you're 59.
Thank you. Kilowatt 4 Mexico. Europe only, 7183.
Sierra Papa 2, India Juliet.
Sierra Papa 2. Sierra Papa 2.
Sierra Papa 2, India Juliet, 5 and 9.
Bravo. Roger, Sierra Papa 2, Italy Juliet, 59.
Roger, 5 and 9 for you, 5 and 9.
Thank you, Kilowatt 4 Mexico, listening 7183. Delta Lima 2, Charlie Bravo Bravo, 59.
The challenges of managing Midway are multiple. Not only is it a national wildlife refuge where we have these incredible natural resources, it's also home to almost 70 individuals who live here year-round. And we are caretakers of these leftover pieces of this enormous human story.
I just hope that we will leave a good impression on the folks here so that we can get their support for future groups, because really that was my personal goal, to set the stage to allow more people to come and operate from Midway.
Getting ready to leave, folks. If you could just get rid of this guy with a camera, we'd be in good shape.
Midway is a very unique place, and it's really something to behold and really worth coming to see in its own right. But if you're going to come and do amateur radio, it's going to have to be by the rules, and I'll do anything I can to support people towards that end.
It's like a fantasy almost. This is one of the most beautiful places anyone will ever visit. It's It's not developed at all, and if you ever have a chance to be here under any circumstances, you should take advantage of it.
On operations of this size, you come with people you know, but more than half of the team are people you've never spent any quality time with. So you're going to leave here with lifelong friendships for new people. You've renewed friendships of past DXpeditioners, and you've done it from a gorgeous remote island.
I really enjoyed the camaraderie as much or more than anything, and also the fact that here I am at this beautiful setting on Midway Island, a place that I'll probably never see again, and probably would not have seen if it wasn't for amateur radio.
I think this particular operation, again, from my standpoint, has been successful. Many things pop up, you take care of them, you face them, you deal with them, and you operate. That's the bottom line, is to give the cues to the people, as many as you can give. That's the whole intent of why we go here, and that's what we do.
We're a small speck in the middle of the Pacific, and a lot of the resource issues that we're dealing with, plastics, pollutants, climate change, sea level rise, those aren't problems that we can solve here. These are problems that take a global solution. And so the more people that we can introduce to Midway, the more people that might stumble on our website, the more people who might see this video and just take another look at how they live, and instead of throwing that plastic in the trash, recycle it. That's how we're going to have an impact. That's how we're going to save the resources. So bringing Amateur Radio Group here to Midway, it makes perfect sense. It enables people around the world to enjoy their hobby, and enables us to get our mission out and our message out to people we wouldn't normally reach. It's been a great group. I was very impressed when in January we opened this up and we said, okay, here's the window when we're going to be open to amateur radio. It was, from my perspective, just mind-blowing how the community came together, how they've been willing to work with the refuge, how they've been accommodating. It's worked out better than I could have ever hoped. And I think that just speaks to amateur radio operators. I was not at all familiar with that sort of world before we started planning this, and I've been nothing but impressed by the folks who have come out. So, nice job, guys.